Former Vice President Joe Biden talking to voters from his home in Wilmington, Delaware. He just got a big endorsement from Hillary Clinton. We watched that about 20 minutes ago. That's a virtual town hall still underway that he's hosting on the impact of coronavirus on women. I want to bring in our panel right now. Donna Brazile, former interim chair of the DNC, and Karl Rove served as deputy chief of staff to President Bush. Both are Fox News contributors, and welcome to both of you. And Karl, I wanted to begin with you in Austin, Texas, just to give us a sense about how much does her endorsement today matter in this campaign when the pandemic continues in the way that it does?
Yeah. Well, look, it would have mattered more if she had not given the endorsement. It would have been a story. But everybody's supposed to fall in line, and they are. I thought her endorsement showed, these things don't have a big impact except in the substance of the endorsement. And while she started off a little slow, talking about how she and Joe shared the same work ethic, sort of it was about her as much as it was about him. I thought it ended on a pretty strong note when she talked about Joe Biden returning with her to Scranton, Pennsylvania, where her father grew up and where he came from and where he was born. And I thought that was particularly poignant and personal. The question is, do you have more of those? And so far, we've had a mismatch of, I'm for Joe Biden, said Bernie Sanders, because he beat me and because he's come over and endorsed some of my proposals. Today it was more of a personal endorsement, and I think that matters, frankly, more than some of the things we've heard today.
The line I picked out, Donna, was I want to add my voice to his candidacy. Go ahead, and Donna, and size up this endorsement. And in the big picture, how much does it matter?
Well, it's like an orchestra. Everyone is coming together, all of the various leaders inside the party, all of the key voices. But the thing that Hillary Clinton will bring to the Biden team is a big list. She still commands a great deal of support within the Democratic Party. Outside the Democratic Party, she has a great fundraising list. She has a great activist list. And if she allows the Biden campaign, who's still trying to raise money and still trying to bring the party together, to utilize that list to go out there and get more people on board, I think this endorsement will pay dividends, not just in terms of having Hillary's voice out there, but more importantly, having the kind of resources that she can bring to the table.
Okay, so she's going to be on the campaign trail. I think that was, whatever trail that is, right? Whatever form that shapes whenever it comes back around. Karl, with regard to this other story now, the accusations going back to 1992, 1993 on behalf of a woman by the name of Tara Reade. The campaign says it's not true. Joe Biden has not been asked this directly. What should he say about this, do you believe now, Karl?
Well, he's going to eventually have to address this directly because we have two individuals who said her brother and a friend whom she told at the time. Two other people came forward, both of them Democrats, whom she told shortly thereafter, within a year or two after of the incident. And then her mother, a tape surfaced of her mother at roughly the time of the incident, the alleged incident, calling in on Larry King. So we now have sort of five voices supporting her accusation. And I look at this from sort of three angles. One is he's going to have to say something about it. And people will judge his credibility on that. Second of all, the press that ate up Brett Kavanaugh over a whole heck of a lot less. Let's see if they treat Joe Biden gingerly or with kid gloves. I was taken aback by the interview by the New York Times media critic. I thought he did a courageous job of asking his boss, why aren't we treating this with the same intensity that we treated Brett Kavanaugh? And Dean Baquet, New York Times executive, his answer that, Kavanaugh was up for a lifetime appointment. It was during the confirmation. It was, quote, a red hot story, implying that the guy who's the Democratic presumptive nominee for president, who would be president of the United States for the next 4 years, that's not a red hot story. The press is going to have an issue here. And finally, for all those Democrat candidates and Democrat office holders, like Kamala Harris, who's under consideration for the vice presidential running mate, who said, quote, we believe the women. Let's see now their reaction to a woman who is supported by at least four other individuals and the tape of her mother. This is going to be an interesting story to watch.
Okay. So within the past hour, apparently, Tara Reade has made an appeal, Donna, that the records of then Senator Joe Biden's time in Washington be made public. Now, based on what I read and I understand, the campaign has said that those records will not be made public until Joe Biden has retired for a period of 2 years. Maybe that changes, maybe it doesn't. Let's see how this develops over time. But to Carl's answer there, he laid out 3 different points. What should Joe Biden say about this now in order to address it, do you think, Donna?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I have no insights, and I don't need to be lectured by anybody about sexual harassment, sexual assault. The other thing I want to point out is that many Democratic women have spoken out. They've been asked about it. Some have spoken out without even being asked. And as you well know, several newspapers have started their own investigation. The Biden campaign said several weeks ago that they welcome an investigation. So I don't see anybody running away from any information. And I think it's important to understand that we not look for Twitter justice. Instead, when women speak up, whether it's what we heard during the Kavanaugh hearings or what we heard about the Trump campaign or what we heard about several other men, that we allow women to speak up and have their voices heard. This is not a time to just simply use the politics of the moment to try to rake up stuff that may not exist. Here's what I do know. Back in 1992, 1993, I was a Hill staffer. And many people should remember, after the Anita Hill allegations against Clarence Thomas, there was training, there was a lot of public pressure for members and their staffers to understand the rules, and the Congress made sure that everyone received appropriate training. So I would hope, as we look into this matter, that we treat it as professionals and not look for things that may not exist.
Okay, well understood. And I'm almost out of time here, Donna, and I don't mean to interrupt. But that wasn't the question. Wasn't about what others are saying about it. The question is, what should he say about it?
Well, I believe that he will address it. Look, his campaign has addressed it. The people who speak on his behalf have addressed it, and I'm sure at whenever he's asked the question, he will address it. I personally know Joe Biden, and I do believe that he will be able to tell his truth, just like Ms. Reed has been able to tell her truth on several occasions.
Okay, Donna Brazile, thank you. Karl Rove, to you as well. Thank you both for coming on.